Well, good morning, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the carving shop, and this will be session 5 of carving a Bufflehead Decoy pair. And welcome back to those of you that have been following along. I appreciate it. Thanks for the support, encouragement, and suggestions. And if you haven't been following along and you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm glad you're here. This channel is all about helping people that want to get started in decoy carving. And I have a playlist created for carving these specific Bufflehead pair from beginning to end, and it's down at the bottom of my home page. You'll find other playlists down there for like a Drake mallard, a hen mallard, canvasback pair. So other species are down there, and hopefully those are helpful to you. If they are helpful to you, hit that subscribe button. That helps me out. It doesn't cost anything, but that way you'll also be notified as I continue to add content to the channel, new videos, new species. If you want to be, you can opt out of those notifications as well. Anyway, in today's session, we're going to be doing some finalization of the bodies. Not a lot of detailed carving, but bumping out some feather groups, and then we'll get the heads mounted, and then we'll be almost ready to finish up this decoy pair. So welcome to all. Thanks for tuning in, and let's get started on the Buffleheads. All right, as usual, we'll start with a little layout work. I got the decoy bodies sanded after the last session so that you don't have to watch me sand. Now what I want to do, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of putting some shape to the feather groups on the body of a decoy. This is the Drake. This is a beautiful white, stark white side pocket. And what I don't want to do is go in here and carve every feather so that it looks scalloped or scaly when we're done, and kind of breaks up the beautiful side pocket. When you look at the side pocket of a Bufflehead Drake on the water, you don't see a lot of individual feathers. So rather than individual feathers, I'm looking for, as I'm doing a layout, kind of some places that I can carve some feather groups in. And I also look for places that I can do some sculpting underneath to add some shape to this feather, so that as light is shining down, you may pick up a subtle shadow in a few places on the side pocket there. Same thing up here. I'm not going to carve every feather in, but I do want to carve a few groups of feathers in that will cast some subtle shadows and break things up a little bit. And then I can do the rest with paint, basically. So that's kind of a long explanation, but I think it's an important concept. A lot of beginning carvers feel obligated to go in and carve every individual feather. And if you're doing a decorative decoy and that's what you want to do, it's great. These are kind of decorative gunning decoys. So I'm going to not do every feather, but look for places kind of, and this is where you have to use your artistic eye too, which is not always easy. I get that. But do some feather group carvings. So enough on that. Let's get carving. Okay, I'm going to use this bullet-nosed ruby bit and do quite a bit of work with it. And I'm just using it to kind of outline some of those feather groups that we talked about. And I do want to separate the scapulars from the tertials here a little bit. So I'm going to create a little bit of a step down to the tertials so the scapulars appear as though they're laying over the tertials, which is as it should be. And I'm going to speed through this video because it's just a lot of repetition, but it'll give you a good feel for the technique that I'm using the point of the bullet to outline the feather group, and then going back in with the side of the bit and taking it down around that, the edge of that feather group. And then once I take that down, I'll go back in the other direction and kind of round the edge of the feather group. So there's not a big step there or a harsh line. There's just a nice bump out that catches some light. So I'll speed it up here. Work in the side pocket area here. There's a lot of back and forth in this technique, and again, I'm not using a lot of different tools here. This is kind of a good generic tool for sculpting feathers like this. And the benefit of this ruby bit is it kind of sands as it grinds, so you end up with a relatively smooth finish, and then it only takes some light sanding to finish the job. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit so we can see different parts of the bird here. You can see I'm not super methodical in the way I carve these feathers in. I kind of jump around the bird, and you may want to start at the back and move forward, or do it in a more methodical fashion. But I just kind of go with line of sight and what I'm thinking at the time and where I need to pay attention to. And if I see something in another area, I'll jump over there and take care of it. You saw a little flash there. That's our signal that my wife is coming into the shop. It's just a good idea there. You can use that tip or not, but it's not a good idea to walk up to somebody carving and tap them on the shoulder, because I've got a respirator and hearing protection on, and that's just a good, safe way to do it. All right, I'm going to stop for a second. You can see a few subtle shadows there. And now I'm going to use the sanding drum, go over that, eliminate all the tool marks from the ruby grinder, and blend things together with the sanding drum. And this is very much an iterative process. I'll kind of go back and forth and back and forth. I'll go back to the pencil in some feather groups again, and just refine things as we go until I'm happy with the way it looks. I always do this under strong lighting, so you have some good shadows cast and you can see some of the feather groups. This half-inch or so sanding drum really lets you get into some of these crevices and create nice, soft, round shapes. And then I'll finish things up with some hand sanding that just gets into places where the drum is not easily going to reach. So I'll break out the hand sander, and you get the idea. So we'll skip forward here. Now I'm just taking a look. You can see things are starting to smooth out. Now I'll repencil some of those key areas that I want to define and go back and forth and make sure they're deep enough to be seen and not so deep that they cast harsh shadows. Just a quick look at this hen bird after a little bit of feather bumping. And I've got some sanding to do to smooth everything out, but I'm pretty happy with that level of bumping of feathers on the back, scapulars, and side pocket. Now I'm going to work on the drake. It'll be very similar. I'm going to define these feathers back here where they meet the tertials. Do a couple big feather groups, but primarily want to keep this nice and smooth. I'm going to stay away from this white area that is very smooth on the bird, but I am going to put a few covert bumps back here because the tail's down. There's a little more covert room here. So since this process is very similar to the hen, I'm just going to show pieces of the carving I'm doing on the drake. We didn't do the coverts on the hen, so I wanted to show that here. Again, just using the nose of the bullet to create a little groove, outlining the feather, and in this case it is individual feathers, and then I'll go back and sculpt those so they're rounded and not just harsh lines. I'm skipping forward here. You can see a little shadow starting to be cast there, and then I'll go back and soften those and round them. I'm not going to carve tail feathers on this decoy. I really want to paint those tail feathers in. Same with the primaries. Starting to work to define the scapulars like we did on the hen and lower that tertial areas. So there's a little bit of a step there. I did want to show this. I'm hitting a real hard spot in the tupelo in that particular spot. There's some sort of knot or harder wood, so I'll just switch to a burr, and that's going to cut through that area a lot quicker than using that ruby bit, and take that down where it needs to be, and then I'll go back to the ruby bit as I move on. Now back to the ruby bit and forming some scapular groups. Moving on, kind of done with the bumping of the scapulars, and now I'll sand those with the sanding drum and then finish sand them like we did on the hen. Just moving on, I'm repenciling like we did on the hen so I can make sure I define those and get them deep enough. Now I'll work on the side pocket and finish up the coverts as well. Okay, I've got some nice feather bumps that I think are nice and soft. I'll continue to sand on those, but you can see what I was talking about, a little bit of a shadow every once in a while, especially from a distance, really gives it a lively look and some character. So I'm going to mount the heads now because once we do this filling around the neck, there'll be more sanding to do, and I can do kind of a final finish sand on both birds at that time. Using DEFCON 5-minute epoxy, I've got some of that mixed up. Put some on the head. On the body. Not so much that it's running out all over the carving, but enough to get a good bond and keep that head in place. I've got marks front and back, so I know when I'm centered on the body. So the drake is kind of a straight forward position. The hen's going to have a little turn. Nothing so exciting as gluing, but you know, it's funny, my grandson Ray listed gluing as his favorite part of carving. So you never know. I like gluing because it means I'm getting close to the finish line. So I'm with Ray. All right, the glue is set. I'm going to use a little acetone, run around the neck joint just to make sure there's nothing loose in there, and it'll help the plastic wood bond. And then I'm going to run around the perimeter and force in some plastic wood. Never a real graceful process. I just get a little in place and then use the acetone in the brush to move it around. So I'll do that with both birds, and then we'll let those set overnight before finish sanding. I'll give you a look at these after I get the neck joints done. Just a quick shot after the plastic wood is installed. All right, we'll call that a wrap on this session of carving a Bufflehead pair. We've got the bodies finished up. I have some sanding to do like we talked about. We'll let the heads that we mounted dry overnight and then give them a finish sanding. Make sure the neck joint is covered and hidden. And then in the next session, we'll get things cleaned up in general, clean up the bottom, brand the decoy, get them sealed up and ready for paint. So until then, this is Tom Christie signing out. Good carving to you. Have fun.